Honorable Minister, Petroleum and Natural Gas, Mr. Hardeep Puriji, distinguished audience, DGH. I'll try and take you through something which all of you are familiar with. I'm just trying to join a few dots here, and also for friends in the media, some of you may not be familiar with this, may be new to this, so this is just more of a landscape that we are trying to give to you here. Next, please. Look, a lot of this is already familiar to you. You all know this, but the idea is that even today, India is a rapidly growing economy. We are still 1/3 of the global average in terms of consumption, of average per capita consumption. As an economy which grows, we anticipate, along with, that's what the world is telling us, India's energy demand is going to continue to grow at 2.5% to 2.4% per annum, while the rest of the world continues to decline at about -1. Basically, our share in the global scene keeps on increasing. Next. So therefore, what does it really mean for us? I mean, some of these, I don't need to list these out, but in any sector or any sub-segment that you look at, we matter. We matter in many ways. At number 2, number 3, look at it wherever you want to. Next. And therefore, going forward, this is what our energy mix is broadly going to look like. As we move away, even in India, we are going to move much more to renewables. We are going to move much more in terms of what we are going to be doing around gas. All those things are going to matter quite a bit. So our dependence on oil may be reducing, but hydrocarbons as a whole will continue to matter for us, at least for the next few years. Next. If you look at the more recent trends, whether it's consumption of petroleum products, it's diesel consumption, petrol, ATF, anything you look at, we are well above pre-COVID levels. We continue to increase, and our total crude processing, we keep talking about 5 million barrels. I think very soon we shall be talking about a higher number. That is what we are looking at. So that is really the direction and the trajectory in which we are moving. Next, please. Now, in all this, we have had multiple crises. We've had COVID, and then we've had what happened in Russia and Ukraine. We've had impending talk of recession. In fact, recession is really seems to be staring at us in so many economies. We've had lockdowns in China. All kinds of things have been happening. But we have seen gyrations in the way oil and gas prices have moved. However, what is also important is the way we have been able to, in a sense, ring-fence some of the challenges which we face from external areas, how we ring-fence that in India. Is that what I would like to indicate to you in the next slide, please? So if you look at both petrol, if you look at diesel, and we look at what has happened elsewhere in the world, in a sense, the energy shock has been muted, has been cushioned over here, and I think the way the oil marketing companies have played a role on that in terms of making sure that these things don't hit, our inflation numbers don't go out of sync, they don't become alarming. I think they really played a major role in making sure that we remain protected and our livelihoods and household expenditure remains intact. Next, please. But having said all that, we still have problems on our hand, which is that if at 85% dependency, what do? Obviously, you have to reduce this dependency. Now, the two ways of doing this, one is to increase domestic production, and the second is to see what can you do around demand substitution. And that is, so this two-pronged strategy is what I'll spend a little bit more time on. Next. So the first is, what are we going to do on increasing oil exploration? Next, please. Recently, if one looks at it, last year, our gas production alone increased by over 18%. Our no-go areas, which were briefly referred to, those come down very, very significantly, and I'll explain this a little later. Export of data around exploration, which is really the starting point of exploration, now that has been permitted. Dispute resolution mechanisms, we have international collaborations. ONGC has announced one, others are in the offing. And we have a national seismic program which generates this data, and that's 97% done. Next. So basically, If I look at how the gas production has increased, that happened last year, our crude production will see a major bump in the coming year. In a sense, a lot of things are coming together to make it possible. The whole framework has changed. The National Data Repository I mentioned. The survey of the Andaman Basin has been completed. Outreach is happening to E&P. No-go areas reduction. Appraisal of the entire EEZ offshore. And the award of acreage. In a sense, these together really encapsulate the entire approach. So what does that really mean? Next, please. I think this is an important thing to understand. And let me explain this and take a minute to explain this. The dotted line is India's exclusive economic zone. That's about 2.3 million square kilometers. Up until now, all these shaded areas, whether it's in yellow or it's shaded or it's dark blue or it's pink, these were areas which were effectively no-go areas, which really meant that the whites where you could do exploration were scattered, they were fragmented. The amount of effort which has gone into it, the cooperation and the assistance which we have got from space, from defense, from Navy, and from DRDO means that what used to be a figure where you had patches all over has now become an area where there are just dots left which are no-go. So when I'm talking of a 99% reduction, the image on the right is actually showing you that how this entire area of the EEZ has become available for exploration, and that is really exciting in terms of the interest it's generating, because what that means, whether it's in the Andamans or in the EEZ, and I'll tell you what that means in a minute, the consequences and the impact which it will have in terms of opening up these areas. Next, please. What this really means is, firstly, large exploration companies can in fact think of areas which are substantial, carve them out. It gives them the opportunity to start thinking of play-based exploration, something which as a country we have not seen much of. It opens up opportunities for deep water, ultra-deep water. Then all these blocks come, because remember they're offshore, so they all come with pre-approved clearances. This is something which we have done in this round as well of the DSF. We have a self-certification process, we have dispute resolution mechanisms, and lower royalty. So some of these areas have very low royalty, and if you look at our sedimentary basins, the kind of prospectivity which is now backed by data suddenly becomes a very exciting area to look at. And the intent is that we should have 1 million square kilometers of acreage under exploration by 2030. That's the target we are looking at. Next, please. Today's event has, of course, been about, the starting point has been about discovered small fields. Now, what does it mean? These are areas where oil and gas have been discovered. Now they have to be put to production. And I'm glad the kind of response that we have got, the kind of E&P players who have come in, all of them have the credentials to be able to put these to production very, very quickly. Some of them already we have seen how they have been able to do from DSF-1 rounds the kind of production which is coming in. We've just illustrated something. Production uptake is happening from them. They're all at the cusp of doing something very, very big, very exciting, and the newer ones hold the promise of so much more. Next. Similarly, coal seam gas, or what we call coal bed methane, the kind of blocks which have been awarded represent a lot of potential for gas production. And remember, this is happening in the context of gas infrastructure, pipelines and so on expanding, so evacuation becoming that much more easier, and a regime which encourages you to explore more, to produce more, and monetize it faster. Next, please. Now, within all this, there is also a transition which is happening, and that is towards a gas-based economy. Next. Today, we have about 4,500 CNG stations. In the next, by 2030, we are looking at 17,750 such stations. Domestic PNG connections will be going up to 50 million, and this is based on plans which have already been firmed up, which have got approval of PNGRB. If we look at LNG terminals, from 6 will be going to 10. Capacity itself is going to go up by 1.5 times. And if I look at natural gas pipelines, the pipeline infrastructure, our trunk pipelines, will be going up from 21,000 to 36,000 within the next few years. City gas today, next please, covers almost the entire country, except for the areas in yellow. Almost everywhere city gas has been given out. It's in work in progress. The trunk line infrastructure is there in front of you. This is what India's gas pipeline infrastructure is going to look like. As you can see, almost nothing is left out. We are reaching the length and breadth of the country. This is what natural gas is going to deliver, and that is how the transition is going to happen. We have terminals all along both the coasts. That is where LNG import becomes possible, and it opens up the possibilities of development around these ports and how they link up with each of the pipelines which are coming up. Next. I now switch on to the other element of the strategy, which is how do we reduce, how do we do substitution, how do we manage demand, what role can that play? Next. One part is bringing in more efficiency. So literally, how do I make every hydrocarbon molecule go further? The biggest ones, of course, are things like refinery process improvements. We will talk about it in the course of time, but really it is about increasing complexity of our refineries, doing much more downstream in terms of petchem, doing much more in terms of moving up quadrants in terms of our benchmarking. That is one. The other one is solarization of retail outlets, which again I'll talk about it in a moment. Next. We intend to move towards 100% solarization of all retail outlets by next year. By next financial year end, 2023-24, all our retail outlets across the country are going to be solarized. We have already done about 40%. So we are up to this challenge. We'll make sure this will happen. And this itself is going to enormously benefit us in terms of increased solar power capacity. And this will reduce diesel generators, carbon emissions. It gets us to net zero faster. A whole lot of things happen in this. Next. But alongside, we are also looking at alternative fuels. Next, please. So really, from coal and oil, natural gas is a transition fuel, moving to biofuels, renewable, and hydrogen. That is what I'm going to talk about in a minute. Next. You're all familiar with the blending story. We achieved 10.3. We are well ahead of our deadline of November 22. We were supposed to achieve it. That is happening. The first 2G refinery got commissioned. The IOC did that in Panipat. 4 more are well advanced. Those will be happening very soon. Today, a variety of feedstock are being experimented with. We are looking at a biofuels alliance with Brazil and USA. Diesel, again, M15, we launched the first dispensing station. We are looking at other testing activities of MD15. So really, blending is not just confined to petrol. We are looking at diesel, we are looking at LPG, all kinds of ideas are being looked at right now. Next. Blending, I've spoken about, but the other big one for us is compressed biogas. 5,000 plants capacity is what is anticipated. 3,500 LOIs have been issued. Rates for CBG have increased substantially. We are seeing more and more interest happening in this sector. It's not just as standalone CBG outlets, but also as blending in CNG is what is going to happen as pipeline infrastructure rolls out. Much progress has also been made around biomanures in terms of the right pricing, the standards for biomanure, and making sure that offtake happens for biomanure. Next. But along with biofuels, this entire EV space, some of the charging infrastructure, again, our oil marketing companies have taken the lead in that. We have been witness to the launch of the solar cooktop, and on the aluminum air battery is again something on which work is going on, which is really work to reduce dependence on lithium as battery storage happens. Next, please. So on the charging infrastructure, the intention is to have 20,000 EV charging stations along our retail outlets. We already have more than 3,500 of those. 67 battery swapping stations are operational. But similarly, auto LPG as well as LNG, that's again a movement which is happening, and 48 standalone CBG outlets are currently operational. Next. If I look at what is happening on hydrogen, this is just a very, very quick run through which I'm doing. I mean, we can probably talk of what we are doing on hydrogen. There are many more things in terms of what's happening in hydrogen, but just to say that green hydrogen as well as hydrogen per se is an area where again OMCs have taken a lead both in terms of JVs, in terms of pilot units, in terms of commercial units. All that is something which is, we can talk about it offline on this. Next. Finally, again a very brief glimpse. Really, many of these things will remain aspirational, but we think that they're also equally achievable. We are number 4 in refining capacity worldwide. We should be becoming number 3 very soon. We will still be probably the second largest in Asia, but from 250 now, we should be reaching 400 by 2030. Similarly, in petchem capacity, we should be going from 21.5 to almost 41 in the next 8 years. The idea over here is really to alert you as an audience about the direction and the trajectory of the ambition and of the change which is going to happen. We are looking at a world which goes beyond conventional oil and gas. We are looking at a world which goes beyond petrol and diesel. Now, in that journey, there are a lot of things where we have many horses in place. So whether it's biofuels, it's petchem, it's EVs, it's batteries, a lot of things are going to happen. But the oil and marketing companies, as well as our exploration companies, are having the strategies in place for this. They have plans in place for this, and they will continue to be playing leadership roles in these areas. But it is something which we would like you to interact with them today so that you can get a sense much more as to what is it that they are planning and where they are in this journey. So thank you very much for your patience and for giving me this time. But this really is just a snapshot of some very exciting times ahead. Thank you very much.